Oh, I think probably ready to start. I think we've got, a few people in, so I'm sure people will kind of join throughout. But yeah, thanks for joining everyone. Hope you're all having a good day so far. And depending on where you are, I know there's a lot of people from around the world, so it's morning or afternoon. Hope you're having a good morning or afternoon. It's good to see some familiar faces and also some new ones. Always good to have kind of a mixture on these webinars. If you haven't seen my face before, I'm Izzy. I'm the head of marketing here at Diginius, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us today. We're really excited actually to be having this webinar with some really interesting people actually. So at Diginius, you may have seen on the invite, we have made some really exciting updates to our software, and we have our new intent data tool. So an amazing tool to kind of support the B2B sales and marketing teams out there. And it's what we're going to discuss today. We now have the ability to provide really good high quality intent leads powered by Bombora. And as you may see, we do have Ryan from Bombora here with us today. So yeah, really excited to kind of get into a discussion with Ryan. And yeah, we've got a few other people as well from Diginius on the webinar. So we have our CEO and founder, Nate Burke, and also our head of product and customer success here as well. So we will be giving you a little insight to a demo as well of how this kind of new tool works within our software. We do have a live chat on the webinar as well. So feel free to ask questions now throughout the webinar at the end, and we will try and answer as many of them as possible. And we will as well, if we don't get to your question, we will be following up with all the answers as well. So still feel free to share as many questions as you'd like in the chat. But yeah, I think without further ado, we'll probably pass over to Ryan, who is VP of Partnerships at Bombora. Thanks, Ryan. I'll just pass over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Izzy, and appreciate the Genius team having me today. Very excited with the partnership and just being able to be here today and just kind of speak with you guys about it, being able to showcase it a bit. Um, yeah, before we kind of kick it off, I just thought maybe a good way to kind of start. I have a few slides I wanted to go through just to kind of talk about Bombora at a higher level. Would be to just kind of summarize maybe what intent data is, or at least kind of how we think about it at Bombora. Um, I think probably everybody has heard of intent. Maybe you have some experience with it. But maybe if you don't, I mean, just kind of painting that picture, I think is a good way to kind of segue into some of the content we're going to go through today. So from the Bombora perspective, I think a really simple way to think about intent data. I think most people probably think about like, hey, there's somebody out there and they're just kind of typing in keywords into like a search engine, and that's essentially what intent is. I think at like a really small level, a lot of people think of it like that. Um, Whereas at Bombora, we think about it more so in the frame of it's kind of like digital breadcrumbs that potential buyers kind of leave behind as they browse the web researching a purchase, right? And a simple way to think about this would be how you behave as a consumer when you're getting ready to make like a big purchase. So, I think I do this myself, right? I don't typically just pick up the phone and call a sales rep if I want to buy something that's like maybe a larger purchase than normal. I actually go online, and instead of just searching in like Google, I'm actually reading articles, watching videos, clicking reviews, and kind of learning what to ask, right? The right questions to ask. Um, and that's the research portion of it. And B2B purchasing, I would argue, is very similar. The only difference is instead of buying a barbecue or like a TV or something, they're buying software or services. So when a company's exploring like maybe a new CRM platform, for example, they don't just reach out immediately. They dig through, sites like G2. They explore vendor websites. They download white papers, and most of that all happens before they actually ever, pick up the phone and call a sales rep. So we can kind of think of intent data as like the structured way of capturing all of those digital behaviors, and it gives sales and marketing teams like a major edge in knowing kind of who's in market and what they care about. That's kind of the way that we think about intent data at Bombora. Nate, did you have anything else you wanted to kind of share on that, or would you kind of agree?
Yeah, so we to kind of give a bit of background on kind of our how we ended up here working with Bombora and so forth. At the Genius, we run a program with Microsoft Advertising for digital marketing agencies, and we support over 1,000 agencies in over 60 countries. And one of the things we've been working to do is how do we identify we have a partner program where we send business to our partners, and so we were looking at how to identify the companies in a market that are in the market for, like, say, PPC services, and so that we can then reach out to them and say, hey, do you need an agency? We can forward it to one of our partners. And we started working with some companies that do this for enterprises like Dell and NVIDIA and some of the big tech companies, and how do they do that? And they kind of showed us how they go about doing this. And they said, it'd be good if you talk to Bombora, because they kind of give a lot of the data of who's in the market when. Because at any one point in time, there may be, say, 10,000 companies that you'd be interested in talking to, but maybe only 3% are actually looking for what you do at that point in time. So identifying who you want to talk to now is kind of the big question. And from our research, if you can improve your results by, say, 40% or more by talking to the right people at the right time, it's a good thing. And because we work a huge amount in search, whether it's Google or Microsoft search, there's a lot of intent in search, but a lot of B2B companies really struggle in getting that intent right from a search perspective, because either the search data is too small, or there's not enough in it, or nobody's really acting, looking for that in that manner. And so they might use sales teams, email marketing, SDRs to go find those accounts. And so we think of intent data as almost like another form of media. And so you've got your your search data is one form of media, but then intent is kind of another. And if you can align that particularly in the search business, then you have a whole nother set of data to kind of use to go after the market. And in looking at there's a lot of companies that do a little bit of intent, but Bombora, if you look at the Gartner or the Forrester kind of circles, they're kind of at the top right as top in the world, and they have 5,000 different sources of intent and how to do that. And so this is typically used from our discussions and research. This is typically used quite extensively in the enterprise market. And these enterprises pay kind of 6, 7 figures for this data. And so what we've been working to do is and partnering with Bombora to distill that into an accessible way, so that we can work with companies, we can work with agencies to start at a very basic level and test it even for free, and then work out how to consume it, and then scale it up to kind of build out a sales and marketing engine kind of in correlation with digital media and then intent data to get much better results. And we're targeting kind of the combination of adding these things together is we're targeting kind of anywhere from 40 to 400% better return on investment in these activities.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it's a it's a good segue kind of into the first slide I wanted to go over, kind of talking about where we get and source a lot of that quality data that's powering a lot of the things that you kind of walked through there. This is a good time to bring up that first slide, Izzy. One sec. Okay, I got to switch to the sharing content. Sorry. But yeah, kind of getting into where Bombora collects its data. I think this was what really kind of sets us apart, because we actually have gone out. I mean, Bombora's been around for about 10 years. So it's taken us a really long time to build this network of partnerships. But essentially, rather than scraping or kind of inferring behavior, we've actually partnered with over 5,000 of the most trusted B2B websites. So think Forbes, Law.com, and other kind of niche industry publishers. These sites are all papered partners with us, so we have one-to-one relationships with them. And because of that, they've actually installed a proprietary tag on their web properties, our proprietary tag. And this actually tracks, real research behavior, like reading articles, downloading white papers, or registering for webinars. And it does so all in a privacy and compliant consent-driven way. And the result of that is the same thing that we put in Diginius platform. It's durable, high-quality data that doesn't, rely on third-party cookies, and it's all exclusive to Bombora. And when I say exclusive, what I mean is 86% of the data that's contributed to our co-op is actually not shared with any other intent provider in the world. So 86% of the data that you would be getting, or you're getting from Digient or Diginius, sorry, um, that is all data that is coming from our co-op that you're not going to get anywhere else or in working with any other kind of intent provider. And I think that's pretty unique. You can go, I don't know if you want to comment on any of this, Nate, as we kind of go along. Feel free to jump in if something kind of pops out. And if not, is you can go to the next slide.
Yeah, in terms of kind of because most of our partners and audience are quite used to the search business. So kind of in how that technically works, you've got these 5,000 sites, and then all the content, like on an article on Forbes, and if it's an article on, let's say, two-factor authentication, it might have certain tags around multi-factor authentication, etc. Or if it's on, how do you do digital marketing, or Google Ads, tagged with Google Ads, or if it's just all these different articles are different areas. And so when there's kind of 5,000 sites, but then there's billions of points of data consumption. So as readers come and do that, and then Bombora tracks kind of millions of different companies and what they consume, and so it's kind of the consumption by company, um, by article, and it's not personally identifiable, but it is kind of corporate identifiable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's all at the company level. So, and that's also a really kind of crucial point is to kind of how, again, we think about intent, versus the consumer, kind of search activity where it's like one person making a decision. At large enterprise or, businesses of all shapes and sizes, there's typically divisions of people that are making decisions. It's groups that are making purchasing decisions. So in terms of the research behavior that goes into that, there's a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders that are kind of taking part in that process. And that's why we're delivering company level intent is because we actually want to understand what the company cares about more so than just like the one individual person. Because it's, again, largely multiple people inside of a specific division, whether it be sales, marketing, HR, customer success. It's actually looking to make a purchase decision on something that's going to kind of help their business be more efficient. And to kind of go back to what I said at the beginning as well, from the co-op, we're able to, see a lot of what we categorize as events. So search is just one factor in that. That tag that we're hanging on all these websites allows us to see things like, again, people registering for webinars, people downloading white papers, reading articles. We can actually see, because the script is on these pages, we can see things like, did they come back to the page multiple times? We can see scroll velocity. Did they scroll deep into the article? Dwell time. How long were they actually on the page? And we can kind of roll all of these things up into, our proprietary algorithm, so to speak, to kind of, decipher whether or not somebody is actually interested in the content that they're consuming. And again, it just goes far beyond just like a simple keyword search, I guess. But yeah, if you want to go, I don't know if Nate, you're going to say something,
Yeah,
but is
I
you,
was
you
thinking,
go
yeah,
to the next slide.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And
because
this is,
yeah.
go ahead. Go
And then
ahead.
I was just saying that this is kind of like this concept of who's in the market. This is quite interesting here. Yeah, Ryan, if you kind of talk through
Yeah.
that, yeah.
And this part right here, this is actually what's in the Diginius platform, right? So what we talked about with the co-op is just kind of where this data is actually coming from. But in terms of what we then do with it, this is the thing that really separates us, right? So we have a very unique data source that is exclusive to only 86% of it is exclusive to Bombora, right? You can't get it anywhere else in the world. No other intent provider is going to be able to have access to data like this. But then what we do with it is also what's very unique, right? So most providers, intent providers, they simply track that someone engaged with a piece of content, for instance. So there's a lot of bid stream intent providers that will be able to tell you that this IP address interacted with, or was seen in an article that had to do with sales intelligence, right? But that doesn't really give you any context, and it's not really that helpful. And this is kind of what we do really, really well. Is we go beyond surface level engagement, and again, we start the way where that starts is by tracking research across our co-op, right? But then we build a 12-week historical research baseline for every company that we monitor across all 17,000 plus of our topics, right? And we're We're constantly monitoring over like 5 million companies that are coming across our co-op and doing research, right? So there's a lot of activity that's happening there. And that kind of points to what Nate said in kind of those billion events monthly. Um, and then we ask the question, right, across that 12-week historical baseline, we say, instead of just saying, company X read an article on cybersecurity, we ask, is company X researching cybersecurity more than they normally do? And is this a statistically significant spike in behavior, right? And when the answer is yes, we call that intent, or we call it company surge, right? And that's what's in the Diginius platform. Is it's a clear signal that this account is now in market and actively evaluating solutions, right? We don't just tell you this once. We track this shift week over week, helping teams prioritize accounts showing real buying momentum and not just kind of random clicks. That's the thing that really kind of separates us from everybody else. And you can kind of see that at the bottom right of this slide. It kind of paints the picture of that baseline that I talked about. And then only paying attention to organizations that go significantly higher than what is considered to be normal, like research behavior for them. Nate, you came off mute. I just want to make sure you weren't going to kind of comment on that. If not, I can go to the next slide.
Yeah, no, I was thinking on the next side, it's like this kind of goes into how you use this data and kind of the
Mhm.
applications for marketing and sales teams. So yeah, there's different ways to use it. We've kind of built in a few use cases into our platform, but yeah, if you can kind of how do companies and enterprises that you work with use this data, I guess would be the
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this goes back to, again, something you said earlier in the presentation. You know, Bombora's business model, I mean, a lot of people, we're just a data company, right? We're not really a platform. We're an intent data company. Our main goal is to get or to make this data as accessible to as many people as possible that it can help. So from like a direct standpoint, we largely just work with enterprise companies that have like big data science teams, data lakes that they can kind of put this into and kind of come up with their own models. But there's other segments of the market that obviously don't have those types of resources. And we want to make sure that they get access to the data too, because it is so useful. And that's where our partner network comes in, and partners like Diginius can kind of come in to kind of fill that void and get access to the same enterprise level data that is powering so many of these different application frameworks and make it kind of useful. And that's really a big reason why we do partnerships like this, is to make it accessible kind of in those ways. But as you can kind of see from the slide, right, the data is like a very sophisticated strategic engine. Um, going from marketing, sales, and customer success. I mean, there's so many different things you can kind of do with it. For marketing, we have advanced audience segmentation to dynamic ad targeting. You can do full funnel campaign measurement with a lot of our solutions. For sales, right, enabling reps to prioritize accounts, showing actual buying interest, to be able to engage with hyper relevant messaging to the people they want to actually reach out to, all the way down to customer success, right, where you can kind of identify upsell opportunities or even use it to prevent churn by tracking like evolving customer interests, right? And I think the last thing I would say is, because the unique thing about our data also is that it's portable. We have partnerships with Salesforce, Marketo, HubSpot, and Outreach. And this is kind of like becoming like highly, highly sophisticated with the data. So, you can obviously use it for just one use case, like a sales prioritization use case. But where it becomes very powerful is when you connect it across lots of teams within your organization, right? Putting it into like a Salesforce or a Marketo or a HubSpot or an Outreach, like long down the road after you have some experience with it. And this allows all of your teams across the organization to kind of stay aligned and move in the same direction with the intent data, to where you're just not doing one thing with it, you're doing multiple things. Um, so whether you're running, a global ABM program or building like a predictive model, looking for competitive intelligence, Bombora, can kind of be the foundation behind all of it. And that's what you see when you kind of like dig into a lot of these larger brands and kind of what they're doing, right? And Diginius has made this accessible in their platform. As Nate said, you can test it, or you can, the barrier to entry, I guess, with Diginius is very low in being able to test something that's powerful. So I think that's really unique.
Yeah, and we're working on like from working with our agency partners that support tens of thousands of different clients. One of the big I'd say opportunity and struggle is with B2B companies, particularly the smaller ones that don't have the large resources and the budgets to track. And so the bigger ones are, they can scale up quickly and do all this, but it's like how do we make it so that we can support the ones that are, startups just starting off all the way up to, the large ones. And so we're putting together like a toolkit of resources. And from an agency perspective, B2B companies are, pretty stable. Once you get them productive, they tend to last for years. E-commerce, they spend more, but they also churn faster and they take it in-house. They do all this. But in the B2B space, if you get the marketing mix right, the retention rate is quite long. And so in looking at how do you manage and all that, we'll over the next few weeks, we'll be releasing like some toolkits to say, okay, if you go into a B2B company, here's the technology stack that you might want to have, which we'll provide in our platform. And then here's the media mix you might want to have. So intent data is one part of the media. You'll also want some, most likely Google search, Microsoft search, LinkedIn, and kind of that media mix that drives the right thing. And then intent to kind of fill in a good part of that gap, and then also our lead intelligence product that identifies companies on the sites. And then you've got a pretty um, solid approach to go in and pitch into companies and cost less to run it and get a better yield for the client. And so that combination of new white space acquisition and media search and all that should kind of give agencies, whether it's a well-developed one, we're working with some pretty good sized companies in this and also startups that are looking to just who do I talk to? I'm going into the US. Who should I target and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's exciting to be able to kind of give these tools to what we say is enterprise for the real world, basically.
Y- Yeah, I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but I definitely think that I don't think most people actually understand for the enterprise clients we work with, the level of work that kind of goes into making this data, into a strategy. It's not necessarily turnkey to so to speak when you work with us directly, because we're giving people raw files and they're having to take it and they're having to work with their data science teams to kind of evolve it across their entire organization into something that's very powerful. Um, what partners like Diginius have been able to do is essentially, make that same level of sophistication into a turnkey solution. A lot of the things that Nate's talking about is going to allow you to essentially do a lot of the things you see on this slide, but you're not going to have, all of these resources and able to make it actionable. I know we're going to have a demo here in a little bit with Scott, but he's going to show you, how just a few clicks of a button, you can essentially make this data extremely actionable without really having to do anything other than just click. And I think that, I've been at Bombora for 8 years. And while the data is extremely powerful, again, if you don't have the proper resources in place, and it's been this way for a long time, it can be hard to, activate. And I just think the Genius has done a really great job in making that extremely usable for people kind of out of the box. And I think that's really unique.
Cool. Yeah, so I think the next slide, there's just a couple of examples.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe talk through this a bit, and then we'll answer a few questions, and then we'll get into a demo.
Yeah, I mean, this is just to kind of show the success of being able to kind of take action on the data, right? Snowflake was able to shorten their cycle, their sell cycle by times two using our data to target ABM accounts. Siemens unlocked 400 new pipeline opportunities. Arcos was able to add 13 million in pipeline by identifying high quality leads. And then Trustwave reduced lead noise by more than half. And finally, Salesforce, they cut their average sell cycle by a third. All just in kind of using Bombora as kind of that foundational layer for kind of their go-to-market activities and then kind of building on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. And we're in kind of the results we're seeing so far. There's kind of two main tracks that companies are doing, pushing the data into sales teams or pushing the data into their marketing, like creating custom audiences and figuring out how to market to these companies to kind of soften the market for sales, or a combination of both, kind of both on the sales and marketing side. But let's see, we've got like one question that's here is, does the intent data also obtain in-market information from social media groups as well?
Um, I think if I understand the question correctly, it's kind of asking are things like Twitter, like actual social media tools, kind of baked into those signals? Is that a good way to kind of? I just want to make sure I understand the question before I answer it. I don't know if whoever
I
asked that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
go ahead.
anonymous, but Otis. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
there it is.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, so the data, it's coming directly from our co-op, and to my knowledge, today there isn't any social media companies that are technically a part of the co-op, so that type of activity is not technically being collected. Um, I guess is the the short way to answer the question. So no.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Um, and I think that's the only one so far. Any other questions? If anybody wants to type them in the chat. And otherwise, let's go ahead and we'll have another continue to type them in, but let's go ahead and get into the demo with Scott and kind of show how Bombora is used in the Diginius Insight platform.
Thanks, Nate. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. There we go. So like Ryan was talking about, everything about this tool has been about lowering the barrier of entry to let businesses of any kind use intent. So we have a really simple three-step process to using the tool. First is to select those intent topics that Ryan was mentioning. So the power of Bombora is that they have like over 17,000 of these. So you can research a variety of topics, but we've spent a lot of time to build a really intuitive interface to helping you go from 17,000 to the 10 to 12 that you actually want to track. We then allow you to target the your ICP, so those businesses you can actually sell to. So you're not seeing a whole bunch of intent with companies that you could never close. And finally, the as Ryan may have mentioned, I think so. This is a weekly updated service from Bombora, so they gather those signals over the course of the week and then share them with us, and then we apply your filters and then give you your own customized report week over week for you to use. So let's go ahead and get into how it's configured. So as I mentioned, it's a three-step process. So the first is finding those 12 intent topics that you want to track intent around. So to help you on that, we have a tool that we have in collaboration with Bombora that will actually go and review your website and then provide suggestions as to which topics are the best match for you. So you can give that up to two web domains. That can be yours, that can be a competitor, that can be a conference website, that can be a white paper that's been published on the subject, anything that would be helpful in getting your business described in detail. And we also provide the full list of intent topics that you can provide here into the list and say, well, my business is kind of like this. Provide that in a keyword, comma separated list, and then the engine will go ahead and provide suggestions. So, for example, I ran this on our website and I got 23 suggestions. And from that, I was able to pick and choose a list of 12 that I think really cover what Diginius is working on right now. So I've gone and customized that here. So once I've saved my intent topics, I can move on into targeting those businesses that I want to sell to. So hypothetically, we offer, so in this hypothetical, I've said that we're actually selling across industry. We don't really need to filter for that, but if we wanted to, we could select as many of these as were relevant to our use case, um, and select the number of the business size that we can sell into. So in this case, I've said that we want to sell into kind of medium, large, kind of center of the market size businesses. And you can also set both countries and individual regional areas where you want to find that intent. So where are the people looking for your business? So I've set some filters here at the country level. I also have the ability in some of the larger markets to select individual cities or states within these markets here. So once I've set both of those factors, all that remained was for me to figure out who was going to receive the report. So I've got this set to go to me, but anyone on my account can also receive the report. So I can select any more I want from there. So once I've run the report, this is what we're going to see on the screen. And these results are also going to be sent to anyone I've designated in that third step. So what I can see for every single entry on this report is which topics that Bombora found surges around. You can see the trend week over week. So basically, this is saying that they're showing a very large uptick in activity around marketing software this week. So as Diginius Insight is marketing software, they would be a great person to reach out to. So once I've identified some of the prospects that look interesting, I can compare as many of these as I want. The tool also allows you to source contacts directly from the platform. So I'll be able to see which records are available here, and it just takes a second to bring the list up. And then I can do some scouting based on my ideal job profiles if I'd like, or I can view their LinkedIn profile to see if they're a good match, get an idea of how they're operating in the space. And if I see one that I think will be a good match, I can use a content credit, and then the system will provide me with their as many phone numbers as it has for them, along with any of their emails. And all of this will be saved into the platform for me to export to whatever system I want to use, whether that's into a CRM for sales, or if I want to use it in building my marketing campaigns. All of that can be used with an easy set of downloads of both the report or the individual users. And that is the Intent Leads tool.
Thanks, Scott. So when we actually, if you can pull that back up, we have some questions. The questions starting to come in. So one of the questions is this service for large companies? Most of my clients are around 100 employees with 100 million in revenue. Yeah, to answer that, yeah, you can get in here and test it and play with it, and then the data from Bombora. Can you show like, all right, so in this case here, we've got is it say 60,000 businesses interested? So, so under the current criteria, there's 60,000 prospects there. We'll kind of let people test it and get the top 10. But yeah, a bigger company would want to consume a lot more data than 10 a week. And so we have different licensing available where you can get 50 leads a week, 100 leads a week, whatever you can consume up to unlimited. So you can get the entire list that comes in, and then and work out how to kind of integrate that into the sales and marketing efforts um, of the client. And another one, is this a tool I could use myself to get leads for my clients or provide it to the client so they can look for contacts and phone numbers? Yeah, that's a great question. So in kind of the Diginius Insight platform, if you're an in client, you can subscribe, get in there and see it. If you're an agency, you can create it for your own agency, and then you can also manage it on behalf of your agencies, or you can just give it to the client. Like we have a program like a reseller, so you can either let the client operate 100% themselves as well. And they can look for contacts and phone numbers. Yeah, so they 100% can look, and the contacts and phone numbers that comes. We also have a partnership with Apollo, and so that data comes through Apollo and kind of pulls in here, and there's certain credits we provide every month, and then they can just buy more if they want to look up more phone numbers, and we are in the process of integrating to kind of the major CRMs to streamline the processing of that. And then that's kind of a like the sales part is one, and then the marketing is another. So we're also working on the ability to create custom audience. So like let's say you did want unlimited data and take all this and then create audiences from it. You in theory could pull 50,000 companies a week and pull the emails and build custom audiences, and then we can work to feed that because we have connections into all the media platforms as well. We can feed this into Microsoft, Google, Meta, etc., and create custom audiences, and that kind of like account-based marketing. But and even if you have a TV commercial, put it into connected TV and Netflix and so forth based on, reaching these people in the data. Um, yeah, so Scott, here's one for you. How long does it take to generate this report?
I was hoping this would come up. So I did have all of this staged because, 10 seconds feels like an eternity when you're trying to do this on a webinar. But this whole report takes about 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes is what it took me to set this up, just to run each of the queries and then to configure the page. Now, this, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a weekly report, so it takes about 5 minutes to set up with your topics. And then this data set will be there for a week, and then it will be refreshed automatically. So it's not a live query. So you would set it up and then let it run. But the setup is very simple.
Yeah, so setup is 5 or 10 minutes, and you can have the report within that, and then every week it automatically generates.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. And can you eliminate industries such as universities?
So yes, the way the configuration works, you can target by industry. So it would just be by omission. So you can select those businesses you want to see, and then any you don't select will be filtered out.
Yeah, thank you. And somebody writes, these capabilities look fantastic. Curious about ROI benchmarks that you can share. Specifically curious around how this impacts go-to-market and new pipeline creation. Um, Yeah, this is like at Diginius we typically kind of try to eat our own dog food, as it were, and kind of once we started working with a combination of intent data and audiences and loading up this data into audiences, into the media channels, and so forth, we have made some pretty significant changes in our sales and marketing and gotten quite good results, and then also in working with some of our partners in various pilot programs in the software, and then we have pilots that kind of turn into software. And there's been a few very interesting use cases that we're finding that we're starting to replicate quite a bit. Like one of them, I guess the initial one is a question for Ryan. Um, a use case that is quite interesting. One of them is just identifying markets to go into, identifying customer groups, and this is kind of a pretty major use case for Bombora. But yeah, Ryan, if you can maybe talk through that one a little bit.
Yeah, so I think the white space use case is very interesting. So what's cool about this is you obviously could bring your own list if you already had like an ICP identified and you were just curious, okay, of the companies that I'm aware of, which ones are actually in market for our solutions. You can apply the intent to that, and you can filter it down to just focus on the companies that are actually in market for your solutions. But the white space example is I don't have a list. I'm not exactly sure who's interested in kind of researching our products or solutions. You can just, essentially do exactly what Scott did and, kind of build your own ICP. And the intent essentially will tell you, okay, here's a group of companies that maybe I'm not aware of that are actually showing, large research behavior spikes in, topics that are relevant to my business, lines, product lines, things like that. And I think that's a really kind of underutilized use case that people don't take advantage of as often as they should. And in my opinion, it's something that you should always kind of have running in the background, even if you already have like a highly curated list that you kind of want to focus on.
Yeah. And so yeah, that there's been a lot of very interesting kind of nuggets found when people just kind of go to a market, like say, okay, let me just look at say the US market and what I do and this, and just say who's there, and identifying these kind of new verticals and new types of companies. And then go to market. Yeah, go to market is quite um, key too, because you then, when you work out, okay, these are the ones I want to talk to, how do I reach out to them? Then it's kind of, all right, do I do it through an SDR team? Do I do it through email? Do I do it through digital marketing, um, events? What is it to kind of, but once you know, hey, I've got a consistent flow of people in there, then how do I put in marketing actions in place to go after them? Um, then yeah, it does create changes in go to market, and it does generate a lot of new pipeline, but it will almost always take a bit of thought and a bit of change in kind of company operations to take advantage and to make, good use out of it.
Yeah, and if there's one thing I could call out, that's honestly my favorite part about what you guys did in kind of building this. At the very top here, you can see, the total number of accounts, right? There's 60,000. And then you see early research, active research, and in-depth research. You can kind of think of this as kind of like a funnel, right? So if you had if this was kind of visualized as a funnel, early research would kind of be at the top. There's 90% of companies showing intent in kind of an early research stage, which means the number of topics they're actually hitting is a lot lower. It's maybe, I think in the example Scott did, he was running it on 12 topics. So in an example for an early research company, they're only showing intent on one or two topics, right? Because they're just at the beginning of kind of their buyer journey. As they kind of advance through that, they move to like an active research where you see there's only 8% of companies kind of hitting that mark in terms of the number of topics they're actually showing intent on, all the way down to in-depth research, which would be at the very bottom of the funnel, right? And you can kind of think of those. And I know you guys are working on different use cases and content to kind of give to your customers, but early research, companies that fall into that bucket, that's kind of top of funnel use case, right? Things you want to kind of run programmatic at, kind of ads. Active research would be kind of middle of the funnel where you might want to do some marketing automation. And then in-depth research, those are kind of like the really high value accounts in terms of, the ones that are at the very kind of top of their research journey, right? They might actually be evaluating vendors potentially. And they're the ones that, are kind of in a research cycle to where you probably, it's probably good to maybe pick up the phone and call them and kind of prioritize or be more proactive in your outreach, more direct, I guess. And the fact that you guys visualize that for users, I think is really, really valuable.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Another question, do you work with Microsoft Dynamics CRM? To answer that, we have done some integration into Dynamics. As Microsoft's kind of leading, Microsoft Advertising is leading channel partner globally. We obviously work with Microsoft quite a lot. So if you do have a client that wants to integrate with Dynamics, then I'm sure we can prioritize that to their kind of specifications. And then can you share examples on how do we use the Diginius platform to serve ads to the intent list? So on that, what we would, and this is kind of one of the other use cases that a number of our partners have been using is one, first of all, they start using the intent data and start identifying different categories of companies and say, hey, here these guys are, have intent. I like that. I'm going to follow up with them. And then like, wait a minute, that vertical is really good. We really like that. Can we do more of that? Could be, certain class of lawyers in the US, could be, so we started getting these questions like, oh, how do I go get an audience in Google or Microsoft ads for this niche vertical? And the answer is you can't, because the audiences are too broad. And so what we can do is work out how do you create an audience out of this data, but we can also create a custom audience. So if you say, okay, I want to work with head teachers of principals in the US, Canada, and UK, we can pull that data and create a custom audience, and then you can use that to advertise into that, or pull an audience from your CRM and then use that to advertise in. And that's where we're getting, yes, this kind of the intent data is one audience, then we can create new audiences from other sources, and then we can also create the audiences from your CRM. So we're working with a number of customers on this on pilots and building this into our software. So if you're interested in doing that in pilot phase, let us know. Or in due course, it'll be kind of released for full self-service as well. And yeah, and like from a B2B perspective, just imagine you've only got, let's say a client has 5,000 target accounts. You can pick up the new ones here and do that, but just imagine you can create an audience and then advertise to those directly through all the major media channels, plus connected TV and Netflix and all that. That's at a very efficient price, and that's where some of the advertising can we're seeing not just 40%, but up to like 400% better yield on the spend when you can get that targeted. Um, Another question, is it possible to target terms and build audiences in other languages slash markets? So yeah, we've had a bit of discussion on this. Markets is quite, yeah. Ryan, do you want to talk about, yeah, the languages and markets?
Um, yeah, by markets, I'm assuming you mean just different regions.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah,
Scott kind of showed at the beginning the ability to curate lists based off of different regions around the world. So I definitely think that ability exists within the platform today. In terms of languages, kind of the same thing, right? Um, Non-native English speaking countries, there's quite a few that you're actually able to kind of filter down into and get specific with. So so the answer would be yes. You can definitely build audiences against, I would imagine non-English speaking languages and markets as well.
yeah. And I think the primary language the data is collected in is in English.
It is, yeah. So our NLP, which is actually analyzing, the different texts and all these pages across our co-op, is English, but our data set is global. So it should still allow you to have the flexibility to kind of reach the markets that you're interested in.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just actually I was on a demo with a client earlier today, and they were targeting certain sectors in just a number of African countries,
Mhm.
and it came up with quite a nice list of banks and different institutions that were in the market for what they did, and yeah, it looked like quite a nice list. And I was a bit nervous because usually in those markets there's not much of anything, and here there was enough data to satiate his
Yeah, unless
initial
you're
interest.
going Sure, unless you're going like really, really, really niche. Again, the data set is global. You should always there should always be enough kind of meat on the bone, so to speak, for you to be able to find something that you can do something with.
Yeah. And kind of related to this, I don't know. One of the reasons we got into this as well is because, like Scott, if you can, do you have, can you pull up lead intelligence data on here? So, like in talking about the difference between some of the big companies and the smaller companies, we work with a number of companies that have quite a lot of data and a lot of web traffic, and so we have a tool inside our platform called Lead Intelligence where, Google Analytics will give you IP addresses. No, they won't give you IP addresses. They'll give you like, okay, this guy in Boston was on your website for 4 minutes and he looked at these 6 pages, and it's like, okay, that's great, but who was it? Well, you don't know unless they fill out a form or they pick up the phone. You can't identify what company that was. And so the kind of corresponding product we have is analytics on in our platform to apply on the site to identify the what companies are on the website. And from bigger companies with large budgets and large traffic would have a lot of data in there, and they get a lot of value out of the traffic that's on the website. So we can see here what companies are on the site and what pages they look at. It's integrated with Google. So if we, pull up like say we can see Goldman Sachs here. If we pull them up, they were on our website today. They came through like how do you advertise on DuckDuckGo? We can look at their contacts, and if we want to reach out to somebody, there's a list of contacts, so we can go kind of get them. But in this, if you've got a lot of traffic, you'll have enough data in here to keep a sales team. Here's some additional leads, and here's how we go. But if you don't have the traffic, like we had a number of small companies, like startups and those that, they might spend, a few $1,000s on digital media, but not enough to like, I mean, if the clicks cost $5 and they get 2% conversion, it's just not enough traffic to keep them busy. And they're like, where do I get more leads? And I don't have 20 grand a month to spend on ads. And even if I did, a lot of people don't search exactly for what I'm looking for. And so kind of the combination of this tool on the website traffic and then Bombora to create new leads that aren't on your website but are in the market. That combination is kind of if you combine those two plus the digital media. So, typically Microsoft Advertising is going to be one of the better sources for B2B traffic. Then you have Google, then you kind of build into LinkedIn. Then you got quite a nice marketing mix to kind of deliver sales and marketing leads into companies.
Yeah, and Nate, and if I could actually just make a comment as well, because we were talking about like kind of that sophisticated infrastructure that a lot of our direct enterprise clients have, is that I don't know if people realize this, um, but technically with what you just showed here, if somebody wanted to, they could kind of combine first party and third party data all within your platform by, looking at the lead intelligence, kind of coming up with a list of, companies that have visited your website and then putting that back into the intent leads report. And you can actually then say, okay, here's a bunch of customers, potential customers that came to our website of this, batch of companies, which ones are actually also showing intent on our products. And you can, again, just all within one platform, do a lot of really powerful things.
Yeah. And then the other use case that, or one of the other ones that is quite interesting is kind of just monitoring competitors and monitoring like either from a um, churn perspective, like say you've got your own customers that are now starting to research other customers, or just if you have a customer list or a competitor list to load that into the Bombora data and find out who's researching your competitors. Ryan, how have you seen that kind of activity?
Yeah, for customer success, churn prevention is like a really big use case, and a lot of people, your sales prioritization is kind of like top of mind when people use like a system like this. But churn prevention is a really good use case that people, it's maybe not as intuitive. So what a lot of our direct customers will do is they'll use it to monitor their existing customer base. So they'll have, to Nate's point, right, a list of their existing customers, and they'll have that uploaded, and then they'll specifically have a batch of topics that have to do with their solutions, and then competitor topics are in there as well. And they're constantly just looking at that on a weekly basis to say, hey, these, customers, for instance, are up for renewal. Are they, by chance in market for our competitor solutions? And they're just kind of using that to monitor and, keep a health status on their existing customers, make sure everything's kind of going okay. And it's a really popular use case people use all the time.
Yeah, thank you. And then here's a question. Who do I speak to if I'm interested in the pilot? I guess, Izzy, is that your um,
Let me bring up
final slide?
yeah, if we haven't got any more Q&As, I can bring up was that the last Q&A?
Yeah, I think that
Yeah,
covers most of it.
no worries. I'll bring up. Cool. Perfect. Yeah, I think that's the yeah, we can wrap up the webinar. Thank you everyone for your Q&As. If we did manage to miss any of them, we will be sending a huge follow-up anyway with the webinar recording, all of the slides and all of the Q&As that were asked. So look out in your inboxes. You will be receiving those tomorrow. But yeah, hopefully you were able to get a really good insight in kind of the benefits of intent data. And thank you to Ryan, Scott, and Nate as well for a really kind of insightful discussion, and also kind of how simple it is to use in our software. If you are a client already on our program, if you're working with Diginius already, feel free to reach out to your account manager. That way they can kind of run you through anything you might want to know or ask about the kind of new intent data tool. So yeah, reach out to your kind of assigned account manager here at Diginius. If you're not working with us, then do feel free to just reach out to us here. We will be sending this all over on email as well. So also feel free to respond to that, and we'll make sure that we have someone kind of reach out to you as well to go through everything that you'll need to know. If you are interested in any of the pilots, the intent data tool, yeah, we'll be able to assist you there. But yeah, again, a big thanks to everyone involved in the webinar today. Thanks to Ryan for joining us from Bombora. If that's, I think we're
Yeah,
cool.
and also it is live in our platform, so you
Yeah.
can just go to our website and sign up and use it without talking to anybody as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. But yeah, look out in your inboxes. We'll be sending everything, a recording of the webinar as well to share around with your teams. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us via that email as well if you do have any questions following the webinar. But I think if that's everything, thank you so much for everyone joining today, and have a good rest of your morning or afternoon wherever you are in the world. But yeah, and thanks to everyone as well for joining the webinar, to Ryan, Scott, and Nate too. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Izzy. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.